Before we can see the parts of an argument, we really need to look at what is behind each argument, whether it is one that we are going to read or one we are going to make ourselves. A significant problem that students have, and most people actually, is that they tend to look at argument as a conflict or a competition, something that has to be won or has only two sides, one of which is obviously wrong and one of which is obviously right. The problem is that when we look at that argument that way, the goal is not to attain the truth or even to express what we believe is the truth, but to merely be right. Um, you can tell because sometimes people will realize that they're wrong in the middle of an argument and yet continue to argue for a position that they no longer believe is true. When we look at argument this way, we also lose sense of the purpose and the audience and the context of what we are writing. That's very, very important because if you remember from earlier courses that you've probably taken, purpose and audience and context are very key to being effective as a writer. I like to think of argument, particularly an academic argument, as more significant when we see it as a search for the truth or a search that carries our truth along with us or helps others to see, at least as we can best note, what is the truth. Otherwise, we accomplish very, very little. So many people look at argument as there's my side and then there's their side. My side is the right way, the other side is the wrong way. The wrong way is obviously bad and evil and all those other things that we tend to look at in a very negative way. Um, so much so that we can't even see value or understanding or ideas on the other side. I think a better way to look at argument is to think in terms of who is involved in that argument, how that argument takes place, and why that argument is happening in the first place. If we look at those very, very carefully, we will find that we have a much better idea of what is going on, and then those parts that we're going to look at in another video will make a whole lot more sense as we place them in our arguments. Who's in the argument? Well, the obvious thing is who are the principal players? That is, who's on each side of the argument, not just the person who is arguing against you, but who are the different people and what are those people's representations. If you are, for example, arguing over what to have for dinner, the who might be the two parents or two guardians who are making the decision on that. And when one is small, a child, you don't generally get to make that decision, but a parent usually does. When one is older, that who is a different person. Okay, if you have particular dietary needs, then the who is not just represented in how old you are, what gender you are, but also in the things that you can or cannot have, or that you should or should not have. Who also has a vested interest in the outcome? Who is going to be affected by the decision? If parents are trying to determine what's going to have for dinner, obviously the children are affected by the outcome, but also the people who have to cook the meal are involved in that outcome. So that makes a big difference as well. Who will be affected by the outcome, but also by the argument itself. If parents are arguing about who's going to make dinner and that argument blows up into a huge fight, well, that affects the children not just in terms of their nutrition, but also their emotional well-being. as an example. And so that's very, very important. I think it's important also to think about who gets themselves involved in an argument that probably doesn't have as much business in the argument, or who doesn't necessarily have the same vested outcome in that argument. If you, for instance, don't have children and you start telling parents what they should make their children for dinner, then you might lose a little bit of what you need to be credible, even if, say, you have done study on nutrition, for instance. How does that argument take place? Well, lots of arguments take place with a very harsh and hostile tone. That doesn't generally produce anything. If we use certain language that vilifies or diminishes the value of someone or someone else's ideas, then we tend to hurt ourselves in an argument. We don't tend to make that argument a very strong argument. How fair are the sides with each other? If you are unfair, and we'll look at this a little bit later, with people who do not hold your position, then you represent them incorrectly and you lie. Or if someone lies about what you think, or they are ignorant about your ideas, or your motivations or anything like that, then it's very difficult for people to come to any kind of agreement or to find a path that's useful for them. Why is that argument taking place? Well, ostensibly, both sides want something. If one person is arguing over the meal and the argument is over what they're going to have for dinner, and one person wants one thing and one person wants a different thing, then they want something different. But also they may want something else. There may be other motives involved. One person who says, I would like to have a Cobb salad for dinner, may have the motivation of trying to lose some weight, but not be ready to talk about that. Whereas the person who says, I want chicken fried steak for dinner, may have a motive that says, well, I just happen to prefer chicken fried steak to salad. Are there other outcomes to the argument? Oftentimes, arguments, say, between teenagers and parents may have an outcome of helping both sides of the argument to draw closer to each other, or to understand an ability to be independent on one part, or to let go on another part. But sometimes the outcome is something that could be very, very dangerous. Next, we're going to look at the basic parts of an argument.